Populism is a political approach or ideology which seeks an expression of, quote, the undiluted will of the people. While populism has been around for many, many centuries, in millennia, there is something about the contemporary form of populism which is quite interesting and quite distinct.
The essential element of populism is what it stands against. And what it stands against is the establishment. It stands against political parties.
So what we start to see in elections in the 2010s is that left-wing voters, as well as right-wing voters, converged through vehicles like One Nation Party, the United Kingdom Independence Party, the National Front in France, and so on, to mount a critique of globalisation. Basically, they were responding to their material circumstances and they were seeking to register a protest.
What truly matters is not which party controls our government, but whether our government is controlled by the people.
The economy's collapsed. If people don't have jobs, if people don't have that sense of well-being, then they look for answers. If the system doesn't yield those answers or doesn't have the resources to yield those answers, then they'll look for people who want to break the system or change the system.
In the United States, they had been impacted by the global financial crisis in a significant way. So what we see over the last 10 years is the electorate there being fed up by the economic and social policies of the established parties and established candidates.
Trump's perfect because Trump is a creature of media. That's all Trump is. He is a media construction. So in the environment where you're looking to try and get a simple, easy to digest message across, Trump is perfect. Make America great again.
And what we're finding is that Australia's populist experience is very different to the rest of the world, where there is this real deep division in society that's developed over time that is very much concerned about economics, social identity, multiculturalism, race, and of course religion.
A lot of people have been locked out of the political process. It's failed them. They're saying so, and the political class and the media class have got very few answers. So they, instead of trying to understand or cater to, they are raging and venting and insulting.
In our surveys, when we ask people what's the most important issue facing Australia today, and immigration, population issues, population growth, that suite of policies. And linked to that probably is asylum issues and boat arrivals, those sorts of issues are very significant. It links to concern about sovereignty. It links to concern about the Australian way of life, whatever that may mean. For these voters, preserving that form of government and that form of nationalism that they characterise as the world of their parents, the world of their grandparents, what Australians fought for.
When we think about populism, there's an instinct to think about the worst of people. So how does populism become a pejorative for prejudice? People who are enticed by populist policies are not people who are bad. You know, they're not necessarily prejudiced and biased and racist and all of these things. They're more than that. These are people who have a feeling that they've lost something, and they've lost the sense of trying to be a good citizen and not achieving the rewards that they thought they would get by being a good citizen.
What's similar is each populist movement tries to appeal to particular kinds of grievances in a particular political situation.
People dismiss the supporters of the Pauline Hansons or the Cory Bernardis or the Greens for that matter as stupid. But you could equally say it's stupid to persist with political parties that haven't delivered.
I completely understand why they would feel threatened and why the kinds of ideas of Hanson would really tap into a sentiment of theirs. If we're being told by Malcolm and his crew that we should be agile, you know what? I'm not feeling very agile. I'm 55, I'm white, I'm male. I don't have a lot of skill set and my job's just disappeared. does this feel, do I feel very agile here? I'm feeling really scared and intimidated. And then I listen to One Nation and I think she makes sense. We're one of the richest nations in the world. We do not cater well for the needy and we don't have sufficient social structures to kind of support those people who are left behind.
So at one level, there's a marked similarity between populism in whatever country you look at, whether it's Germany or whether it's England or whether it's Australia. And that similarity is that distrust of the existing system, the yearning for simplicity, the yearning for a leader that will encapsulate the national will.
This is where populism has its challenges. So basically, it will only ever work while you deliver what you said you were going to deliver. And increasingly, voters mark their cards of the politicians very, very hard.
We ask people, how much confidence can you have that the government in Canberra is doing the right thing for the Australian people? And at the peak of our surveying, that was in 2009, nearly half the population said, yes, I've got a lot of trust or some trust. And now it's less than 1/3.
And what we've also seen is a complete gumming up of the works. Nothing can get through the Senate that isn't soft and fluffy and lots of spending. Hard decisions can't be made. And increasingly, it's harder to appeal to the wider public interest for anything. Firm leadership, for good or bad, is almost impossible now in Australia.
Populist parties never really expect to form a government, but what they do want to do is influence parties that will form a government.
The rise of these minor parties in Australia, even the rise of these populist parties, is actually very good for the Australian democratic experience because it opens up more options for voters, more policy options, more choices, more candidates, and a sense of these parties being able to keep governments more accountable.
Amongst young people, I think what they are better able to incorporate in the way that they think is that they accept the world is made up of differences that don't actually matter.
Young people understand the world as being a bigger space and a global community in some respect.
Universities, that's what they're for, thinking, independence, developing your ideas.
Where are the limits to what we tolerate and how open are we going to be? Where does free speech stop and hate speech start? So I think as long as they're talking about those issues, then universities are still making hopefully a really good contribution to a civil future.
Is far-right nationalism a new global movement? Is the rise of right-wing populism the answer to the world's problems? Or is it a disruptive force that is threatening the international order? Hello and welcome to Bigger Than Five with me, Rida Fakhri. The far right is on the rise. From Italy to India, from the Philippines to Brazil, the spectre of populism has become global. In Europe, far-right parties have made headway like never before since World War II. In several EU countries, they have stripped a significant number of seats from the centre. Donald Trump, who sees himself as the cheerleader of this rising insurgent movement, tried to capitalize on this growing momentum during his state visit to the UK this week. But beyond their populist slogans, what can these political disruptors actually achieve?
From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
Immigration should be stopped, and Islamic ideology should be eradicated. Globalization should be regulated, economy and oligarchies return to their proper place.
There are no far right here, but the politics of good sense. The extremists are those who have governed Europe for the past 20 years in the name of precariousness and poverty.
managed in 5.5 weeks not just to frighten the establishment. Oh no, they're not frightened. They're absolutely terrified.
Hungarians commissioned 3 things from us. In the first place, they've entrusted us to stop migrants across all of Europe. They've commissioned us to defend the Europe of nations, and they've commissioned us to protect Christian culture in Europe. And you can be sure that that is what we are going to do.
So as the populists march on, the leader of the pack remains at the helm here in Washington. With his sights on the 2020 election, will President Trump continue down the populist path? I'm joined by Stephen Moore, a former senior economic advisor to Trump and an economist at the Heritage Foundation. He was previously considered for a seat on the Federal Reserve Board. Stephen Moore, you believe that Donald Trump has converted the Republican Party into, quote, a populist working class party.
I do think that Donald Trump has been a president who has really taken a lot of positions that are populist, that on immigration, on trade, on cutting taxes. You know, if you look at the way he won the election in 2016, he won a lot of these kind of middle class voters and middle America. And by the way, having worked for the campaign, I think a lot of Americans were disgusted with both the Republican and Democratic Party. President Trump, in my opinion, is a very pro-business president, and which is good. We're creating a lot of jobs. Our businesses are financially healthy. He's unapologetic about that. But I can point to you a lot of areas where he's taken on the big businesses. The big businesses don't like his trade policy with respect to China, with respect to Mexico. He's taken on the big drug companies in terms of drug prices. He's taken on Google and some of the big, technology companies.
Part of Trump's quote-unquote populist message as well is to pit the United States against this foreign enemy. More often than not, China, yes, stealing jobs, taking away jobs and people's livelihoods in this country. You've called the trade war with China the epic battle of our time.
It is.
And you say that Trump is right to take the fight to Beijing. How does an all-out trade war with this new economic superpower actually benefit the United States?
Well, we're in an abusive relationship with China. They cheat, they steal, they lie, they're involved in cyber espionage against the United States, they're hacking into our computer systems. This is the new Cold War. I really believe that. I think China is back to its totalitarian roots that you saw under Mao. I think it's become a regime that's both an economic and national security danger to the United States. And, this behavior of them stealing $300 billion of our technology every year, the fact that they've disregarded every WTO rule and regulation, they're acting illegally, the fact that they have not opened up their markets to the United States while we've totally opened up our markets to them. It was one thing for us to turn a blind eye to some of the economic malpractice that they were involved in when they were a $2 or $3 trillion economy. Now they're a $10 trillion economy. As you just said, they're the second largest economy. We can't go forward with a relationship where they're cheating and stealing and we're just basically taking it. This is the working class president. There was a report in the Wall Street Journal that the biggest wage gains have been for lower and middle income people. I just think it's been a phenomenal success for working class Americans. And I think it's a beautiful picture we've got right now.
And do you expect Donald Trump to get reelected on the basis of the populist policies that he's adopted so far?
I think there's a very high likelihood Donald Trump is going to be elected president in 2020.
Further south, the so-called Trump of the tropics, Jair Bolsonaro, was sworn in as Brazil's president in January. The former army captain ran on easing gun laws and promised to stamp out crime. And while thousands gathered on the streets of Rio last week in support of Bolsonaro, we went to Sao Paulo to hear how Brazilians there view their populist president.
A gente fica muito vulnerável, né? A gente trabalha no balcão dia de manhã, 5h30 da manhã. Fui abordado aqui por dois elementos. Onde o cara me empurrou um revólver, me colocou no peito, me levou lá dentro. Ele o tempo todo tremendo, com a arma engatilhada. Então eu já fui assaltado aqui, sim. E não só aqui, na rua também. Com esses dois assaltos que eu tive, o que eu mais torço hoje é para que a justiça funcione em pleno vapor. E que o bandido seja colocado onde tem que ficar. O Brasil precisa de uma pessoa que dê uma impactuada. E o Bolsonaro, quando se candidatou, por ele ser militar, não é que eu sou a favor ao militarismo, não. Eu sou a favor das coisas certas. Acho que o Brasil hoje está sendo representado por uma grande maioria e essa é a representação que chama Bolsonaro.
I'm joined by John Alterman, Senior Vice President and Brzezinski Chair in Global Security and Geostrategy at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, and Frank Buckley. He is a foundation professor at George Mason University's Scalia School of Law. He is also a former campaign speechwriter for President Trump. Do we see an increase in populists around the world? Do we see a trend towards deglobalization? What is the answer to many of the world's?
I think ultimately populists can't deliver what they promise. That there's always something, populists often, the movements get started on the charisma of a leader. But either after the leader dies or leaves the movement or just can't fulfill all the promises, people see through it. Democracy, and I distinguish democracy from populism, this sort of messy, everybody's in the minority, is slow, it's messy, it's inefficient, but it's better than all the other stuff. Yeah. And I think we have to get back to understanding it's not perfect, but it's better than all the alternatives.
Are we seeing the slow demise, the slow decline of democracy?
No, I don't think we are. It may be so in other countries, but in this country, if that is happening, it's only happening because some people are questioning our constitutional norms.
And yet there seems to be a serious erosion of trust, again, also on the part of the populace around the world with the status quo, with the establishment. What is the best remedy?
Well, want of trust or simply political disagreement? The latter is perfectly appropriate.
All right. Frank Buckley, John Alterman, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
And with globalism now in retreat, will this far-right populist revolt address the economic and social challenges facing many countries?